Let's talk about failure in our Christian schools.
This episode of the Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. And as always, the thoughts and opinions expressed within this episode are those of your host and not exactly that of the Herzog Foundation. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
I'm Mark Zockel. Tonight, we were thinking about what we're going to talk about tonight. We have our list ready, and there's nothing seemed to fit. We talked about that before, how we know that there are times when we do not want to talk about what it says that we're supposed to be talking about. So tonight, we're taking a different path. Tonight, I'm going to ask Matt a question that he has not prepared for other than his whole life. He's been preparing for questions like this.
That's all I've been doing since second grade, preparing for this episode.
Not kindergarten or first grade, but second grade at the very least.
Grade.
We're going to talk about failure in our schools, and I'll come to a question which I mean to ask from the start. We won't get there right away, but we're going to talk about failure. So we won't immediately jump to our partners in discussions of failure. We'll wait for a while until we talk about the Herzog Foundation and grade like student information systems. Besides that, let's go ahead and talk about failure. Matt, if we were going to think of this failure in our schools, let's just start with where have you seen students fail in your school, in your time as an administrator, even as a teacher somewhere else? Where has there been consistent failure amongst the student population?
I feel like this is a loaded question, number one.
It's really not. I just need to hear from you. That's it. Your school's garbage.
Dog, man. Okay. Where do I consistently see students failing?
Maybe where have you seen non-isolated moments of failure? A student may have had an isolated moment of failure in speaking to a representative who has come to the school, and the student just fumbled through their words. But where have you seen more consistent issues or perhaps failure, like an assessment? We are expecting to see, I don't want to say expect, but I would expect that you would have consistency amongst academic failure. So where in your school do you see failure?
On the students' side of things, where students are consistently failing. Again, I tend to see the isolated, I'm going to start with that, the isolated events of failure predominantly in the academic side of things. So a student fails a test or maybe even fails a class. That certainly happens, but I don't necessarily, that's not my immediate go-to when I think of where I see students failing. My immediate thought is our schools are built for a purpose. They have specific missions in mind. And when a student either just doesn't get it, doesn't understand the purpose of our school, doesn't understand why they're at the school, that's what my mind generally jumps to when I think of, man, they didn't get it. Or what I say, maybe less, but I would still consider this probably more of a failure, is outright rejects it. Like I know that that's why the school's here, and I don't buy in. I don't get it.
That seems to be at least a failure in enrollment processes, at the very least. Maybe there's more to it, but that seems to be a failure in the onboarding, that there's a student who could make it through, because the student represents the family, and that's not always fair. I want to be really careful with that.
Right.
But perhaps that is a failure, and perhaps those things have made you consider your questions, your interview questions, your process for enrollment in the past, how much you ask of students at which grade level, how much you ask of students who matriculate from one grade to the next, because perhaps it was all fine and hunky-dory in K-5, second, fourth, sixth grade, but now am I repeating enough questions in between those grades to assure myself that they're still a comfortable fit for our school? Is legacy enough to keep them there? Is having an early enrollment for that child enough to keep them there? Where else in the school? We mentioned students. How about, and the question I have, the big question tonight would come back to students. and reflect on faculty and staff and leadership and development of the school, the mission of the school. But just generally, other places, do you expect to see or have you seen failure?
Yeah, I mean, the next thing I would have gone to immediately after stating the students, and I think you went there, was to the parents, just kind of the same thing, in that the parents maybe did what they needed to do to get their students enrolled,
Mhm.
but then don't buy in. And generally, if I do find a student in that state, the parents are right there. They're not bought in. So, of course,
Mhm.
the student is
Yeah.
bought in. On some occasion, the parent is struggling just as much as we are to get the child on board. But apart from that, I think I was just thinking of this actually this morning. When we have a mission of doing all things excellently, if you take the time to assess yourself, as we all ought to do, and leave
Mm.
nothing, no leaf unturned, right? Why is it that when we have that kind of a mission, do all things excellently, there's going to be that glaring thing that we all agree is not being done excellently, and yet we are not doing anything about it. Or where we try to do something about it, there's just,
Mm.
you know, it is what it is. We need to concentrate on other things. And we make excuses for ourselves when we won't accept that from our own students. And I would say that would tie in then with, if I were to say, where are my failures with my teachers? I would say a very similar thing, in that when teachers are asked to do something from administration and they give the student response without recognizing this is the exact same thing that they're complaining
Yeah.
about in their classrooms.
Mhm.
That's probably the most glaring, which my teachers never do.
No, of
I'll
course
just
not.
make that clear. My
No,
teachers
never.
never do that.
No.
But that would I would say is where we can't get to that point.
I expect failure athletically, at the very least, being a loss of a game, a loss of a spot on a roster, getting beat out for a spot, perhaps not making a team. That's more student side. I have to believe in the innate depravity of man because that's biblical. So I do have this conservative view of all of the portions of the school, all of the parts of the school that operate. And I have to think that even the teacher that came to me with the highest accolades and best regard for whatever their content area, perhaps even in that content area, they're going to mess up. They're
Mhm.
going to not prepare for something. They're going to, perhaps you have been a part of or you've seen um, event planning failures in the school. We could keep going with things that we have seen go wrong. And again, we're saying failure. That's a scary word. Perhaps, just something that's dropped, something that
Sure.
didn't quite go right. And ultimately, yes, technically it is a failure, but there's usually more of a negative
Even
connotation to that term.
to the point of, just the basic, I as a teacher have gone through my lessons for a certain chapter and come to the assessment and nobody did well.
Hmm.
That's going to be your classic sense of something didn't work. And you're going to be reevaluating. You're going to try to decide, was it me? Was it them? But there was failure, either for their comprehending or my teaching.
Hmm. Sure. Let's park on the students, and that's where we're going to go, and that's where the big question is going to come from. You say, the mission of your school, Faith Baptist School, exists to educate students. I say this every day.
Sh- Shame on you. Shame on you.
Faith Baptist School
You should
exists
know
to
this, sir.
educate students.
Educate and develop
That
Christian
was
young
that was my
people.
that was my aunt. I couldn't remember what the aunt was.
Yeah.
So the mission of your school is Faith Baptist School exists to educate and develop Christian young people to pursue excellence in life for God's glory. That's a big task that goes outside of academics.
Hmm.
So when it comes to failure in, let's start with the simple academics, do you have conscious what happens when your students fail conversations as part of your training with teachers, as part of your onboarding with teachers? Because you would you would say that you have a college preparatory curriculum in so much that you expect students to be well prepared when they go to the university level. Not to say you have honors courses coming out the wazoo, but very much expecting to be, we already went over it, high literacy rates, so on and so forth. But at
Yeah.
the
I
same
like
time,
I like to say Yeah, I like to say rather than college prep that we're a life prep
Life prep
program.
institution.
That's
But at the
that's my
same time, you are not placing students in Ivy League institutions at a 99% rate. You don't charge $100,000 for a student to be a boarding school, which runs them directly and is a feeder to you name it, whatever college.
right.
So we are expecting to come into contact with students who may or may not be A plus students. The enrollment process does talk about above average students because of the limited nature of support that might be offered at the school for need students. But outside of that, there is an expectation of a generalized student.
Mhm.
So do you address student failure? And if you do, to what extent? If not, do you see a value in that? Talk to us about how you prepare teachers for student failure.
Sure. So I think number one, the important thing is to expect failure. Don't be surprised at failure. In the sense of if a student is failing and you have to start not, I would say, don't start at the assessment. You start with the day to day. Are they getting it? Are they not getting it? Um, if if there's failure, I think one of the biggest misconceptions, perhaps, of education is you have to keep moving. You have to get through the curriculum. And so one of the big things that we say is what matters is right now. Where are they? You cannot get them lost in the dust. If they're not getting it, back up. Now that can be hard, that can be difficult if you have 1 out of 15
Exactly.
students
Sure.
that's not getting it. So what do? If 1 out of the 15 is not getting it, then you have a resource. You have right now, it's our elementary principal for the elementary, and technically she's still her for secondary, even though the secondary principal will step in as well, and we will come up with a game plan for that one student, whether it's one-on-one time with an aide or with one of the principals, whether it's some tutoring, whether it's retesting or, whatever. There could be a lot of different things after time is taken to kind of evaluate where they are. So the day to day, we've got to recognize where they are. We've got to recognize when they need that assistance and not wait. Don't
Mhm.
wait to jump on it. I think the bigger level would be whenever you do get to your state or national assessment or your standardized assessments, and we can see that they're performing well below. Now, granted, it could be one test, and we should be able to determine that was a fluke. That was not quite them. That doesn't represent them. But if they do need, it's kind of the same thing. They need a more concentrated, a directed study or support, extra help to get up to where they need to be. Then we need to be ready and flexible to do that. And I think that's the key word there is flexibility. We have to build that in for the sake of our students, because the big picture that I'll bring back to the teachers is what is our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is not to get through the curriculum. Our ultimate goal is to be educating these kids and making sure they're learning. They're not learning, we're failing. So that is the key element
That's
for
your
the teachers.
that's what your conversation with them. I like where this went because it allows me to go where I want to go, and we're halfway through now, so let's go ahead and get there. You brought up how you do interact with teachers, what you do try to tell the teachers that come to your school, which may be very different than they hear in some, college prep school that is completely um, honed in on their 100% going to college, going to Ivy League full ride. And it's also different than the nature schools that are popping up all around us now, and the micro schools that want to see more hands-on learning. We don't grade. We're going to make sure we are literally in nature. We're going to be engaging with this engine over here and learning all of our lessons about math, history, science, English from this engine. We could keep going with just the range of where education could be, and not saying one is right or wrong, but just saying that's not where you are. So for where you are, you've introduced teachers to your school's path for understanding failure. Students fail academically, students fail socially in their responses to administration, responses to authority, students fail in their responses to their peers, students fail athletically, students will fail spiritually, students will fail. It's hard to you can say fail physically, like they break an arm or something like that. But the big question for you before we talk about the portrait of a graduate at some point, can a student walk through Faith Baptist School, never fail, and truly be what you want a Faith Baptist School Falcon to have been?
Great question.
That's a good question.
Bravo. Bravo to you, sir. Bravo. My answer to that is, I don't think it is. I don't think it is possible for a student to never experience failure and get them where we want them to be.
So if that is an expectation, I want to,
Yeah.
drive you, I want to herd you, I want to sheepdog
I'm
you
there.
to the,
I'm following. My nose is right there. We're going.
if that is what you say, you don't even think it's possible for a student to work through your discipline system, your athletic system, your fine arts system, your academic system, your relational system, your authority, your behavior management system perfectly. That means
Well-
you are expecting the innate depravity of mankind to include failure in one of those situations. And maybe it's not, I'm not saying each one of those would be a
Yeah.
sin. They're not sin. So that's why I kind of want to,
Or even a catastrophic failure.
sure.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
Right.
But if you are expecting it, are you creating opportunities for it? And do we have, and then the second part, from the known expected failures of the system or failures, when those failures are going to occur, what is your bridge or your ladder away or above or through that failure? And who's coached on that? So I guess to start with the first, you say you expect it in your system. And maybe expound on that a little bit. Maybe tell us more about that and why and have you thought about that before? Have you considered that before? Go ahead.
This episode is brought to you by our partners at the Herzog Foundation, whose mission aligns beautifully with ours to advance and support Christ-centered education. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze excellence in Christian schools, helping more children experience academic rigor, biblical truth, and strong moral character, all in a safe and nurturing environment. Whether through teacher training, principal development, or strategic media efforts, the Herzog Foundation is committed to helping you, the Christian school leader, fulfill your calling with excellence. Their vision is bold but clear, a national renaissance in Christian education that impacts culture for generations. At the Christian Principles Podcast, we're proud to stand with the Herzog Foundation in that mission. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. Together, we're building schools and futures on the rock of Christ. And as always, tell them that the fellas here at the Christian Principles Podcast sent you their way.
Tired of report cards that look just like spreadsheets? GradeLink makes it easy to create professional, great-looking report cards that reflect your school standards. And since parents can optionally view them online, there's less paper and less hassle. Head over to cpp.gradelink.com to see how you can upgrade your report cards.
I want to clarify by saying I don't want to say it's impossible for a student to never fail in our system.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's totally possible that they can fully grasp, be that sponge, take it all in, and do well. But the reason I say I wouldn't necessarily look at a graduate who has gone through without failure and say we've achieved our goal in the sense of, I'm a history teacher. History is all based on the failures of the past, and you have to learn from that. And without those experiences, what are you learning from? So that's why I always try to encourage my students. If all you're concerned about is getting an A, I think you're missing the bigger picture. I'll share this in my parent interviews. My proudest moments as a teacher are not the students that got 100% every single time on a test. In fact, I could look at those and say, were they pushed hard enough? They probably should have been pushed harder if they were getting 100%.
And that goes into this
every single
question
time.
too, right? That's part of this question too.
I am far more proud of those students that maybe consistently are getting D's or F's, and they listen to the admonishment of here's how you can change, here's how you can adjust to understand and prep better for these assessments. And when the assessment comes, they get a C because they put the effort in, they adjusted, and they changed. And I'm more proud of those moments than I am of just these got another 100, got another 100, So when I say that, in creating opportunities for failure, and sometimes I'll even joke around with the kids, like, I'd love it if you fail this because you might learn something, and you have to give yourself those opportunities. This would be what I would share with those kids where a new sports season is coming up and they're just like, nope, I need to go home. I need to study. I need to do all these other things. I'm too busy. I can't try this new thing. If you don't try the new thing, you're never going to experience maybe something that you could be passionate about, your next love, your next passion. And we have, for years and years, our school had a handbell choir. And there came a point in time where we were looking at kind of reviving it because the past leader had kind of retired and moved on. And a new guy comes in to get the handbells going again. And the question was, do we make this voluntary? They sign up, they try out maybe for the handbells, or do we just make everybody go into it? And we decided we're going to make them go in. We're not going to give them the option because handbells is not the most appealing thing, especially for those that are unfamiliar with it. Just dinging a bell. Like, really? Is it all that interesting? Is it all that fun? But we have found that 98% of the time, that might be a stretch. Students that were just completely sold at the beginning, this is going to be horrible, we're going to hate this, have come out being like, I can't believe this is my last year of handbells. I don't know what I'm going to do without this. Like, this has been so awesome. This is it's an experience they never would have had if they had the option. And granted, I can think of students that never played basketball that I think maybe would have done really well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to twist their arm to play basketball. Maybe there's those that never sang a solo for fine arts, never attempted a certain academic test in competition, and they'll never have that opportunity. They'll never have that experience to look back on and say, I gave it a shot and I didn't really like it. Or I gave it a shot and I was actually really good at it and I really enjoyed that. And now I was thinking of going into this field, but I think I'm going to change my career path because I think that's actually something I never thought of before. So failure opens those doors of opportunity, I believe. Granted, there's success in that too. You can say, well, I'm going to give it a shot and be successful, not actually fail from it. But
Sure.
But it's the opportunity to fail.
And we also want to be careful with those
creating that opportunity.
Yeah, we also want to be careful with those opportunities to fail because we don't want them to fail in drug use. We don't want them to fail in their alcohol consumption. We want them to learn, like you said, from the stories, from the biblical narratives.
But
we want them to learn
even in
from
that sense,
those sorts of things.
Even in that sense, we talk about, relationships. We've talked about that in this podcast. High school relationships very rarely ever work out in the long run, but how many have that time where they look back and, man, I made a mistake. I really messed up. Either, got caught breaking the rules or, got too involved with somebody that ends up being history, not a part of your life anymore. And you learn the next time, you know what? I put my hand a little too close to that flame, that burnt, that hurt. I don't want to do that again. I want to be more careful next time.
I was too close to the fire. I had to pull myself back from the fire.
Snuffed it out. So yeah, I think that has to be the thought process. But here's the end of that, because you can't just create those opportunities and say, it is what it is. I think it's also very important how we respond when the failures occur. Because I'll just stick on that one first. For instance, a couple got in trouble for crossing the line, even though they were told where the line was. They clearly knew what they were doing and crossed the line. And something that they both didn't recognize is the teacher that caught them, they very much respected, and they hurt that teacher a great deal. And that teacher let them know. And almost more so, they were more regretting that relationship that was hurt than what they did, kind of with each other. And that's going to inform them in their future. They're going to look back on that and they're going to be like, I want to learn. So how are we responding? Because it could have been just very easily, shame on you. You broke the rules. You know better, whack, 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 whack. But what they got was hey, you broke the rules, but more importantly, you've broken my trust. And you need to understand that your decisions don't just affect you. They do affect other people. Those kids know you're breaking the rules too, and you know that they know it. So what are you teaching them? And you're going through that with them. And at the end of it, I remember sharing with them, here's the beautiful thing, guys. While yes, there are going to be consequences, you now have the opportunity to learn and grow from this. And God's going to use this in your life in some way. And you have to get to that point, whether it's with relationships, whether it's with sports, whether it's with academics, get to the point of not worrying about the immediate consequence, even though those do need to be thought out and they need to be purposeful and they need to be helpful. But what are we learning from that failure? And where's the thought process going? If it's a broken relationship, we got to be working on fixing that relationship. If it's a grade that's been brought down some, we got to work on restoring that in some way, shape, or form. So if it's simply identifying, or even with the parents, hey, mom, dad, your son failed his test, just letting you know, that's not really cutting it. Here's something that I've noticed that maybe would be a help to help them get over that. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that I would like for them to study so they can retake this test and do better the next time. But you got to have some kind of plan.
So I asked you what it was that what it is that you have seen or what you talked with your faculty and staff about, and that would be the bridge out of the expected failure, because you said you would expect that you don't expect students to make it through the school unscathed, without failure, which means you had better prepared for that failure. And it sounds like what you just dropped us off with, that, shall I say, restorative justice practice, which maybe that's too broad a term, apply to too many things for us to be completely comfortable with, but it just by the technical definition, it is justice provided with restoration in mind. That's biblical. And it sounds like that would be where you would want to make sure that your teachers, your faculty, your staff all get to, because when it stops short of that, it can be seen as, and not that students aren't going to see even those practices as still punitive and obnoxious.
Sure.
And they're still going to have a story about the school being too strict. So, and parents too, someone's still going to have that story, even, just enforcing what they signed on saying that they read and knew. But if it does stop short of that restoration, if it does stop short of that, we didn't set you up for failure on purpose, but you failed in a way that we have seen others fail before. So let's get through this and move along. We still love you. I do have to ask the question though, is there a point at which you do set up a testing mechanism? Is there a trial inserted into the life in the 9th through 12th grade of a Faith Baptist school, South Falcon, purposefully to see them fail? I imagine the answer is going to be no. I wonder, is there a way to do that without being too barbaric? But then I think about this, and you can respond after this. I think about when we take students away for a leadership development time, or when I take a team away for team building time, oftentimes the leaders of those exercises who come in, and they're, the consultants who come in, and I remember one very specifically where your team had to get together on the floor and stack together these Lincoln log looking things in such a way that they would stand up and be there throughout the rest of the time. And it was do it as fast as you could. And those of us who'd never done that before, going through that process, we succeeded in the process, but the idea was we were nowhere near the time. So we succeeded the process, failed the time. And it was thought that like the time this exercise leader was putting out to do this stacking was just insurmountable. There's no way to actually get there. And then, of course, over the course of the 20 or 30 minutes, my team is furiously working on that project, and you're seeing somebody get frustrated and walk away, and some leader that stands up, you wouldn't have expected to stand up, and someone voices opinion where they wouldn't have voiced an opinion before. And of course, you're learning about your team, what you're supposed to be learning about your team in these times. The team figures out, everybody keeps their hand on the stick, and then you just label every 1, 2, 3, 4, and then by the time you practice it one time, you're setting it up in 4 seconds or 5 seconds, where it used to take you a minute and a half or whatever it was. That is purposeful. That's expected. I'm putting you through a test to see you fail, to see you grow from it. I don't know as though our schools are doing that purposefully, should be doing that purposefully, but designing such
Yeah.
And to what extent is that failure versus, learning from, but that still starts with failure? What are your thoughts there before we got to shut this down?
Well, I would say my immediate thought goes to government class when I give them questions from the naturalization test. I kind of feel like I set that one on purposefully so that they just fail. I always tell them, if you fail this, you are being deported.
Yes, goodbye.
And I've deported many students. But yeah, I would say, in kind of response to that, this was why when we were building our new mission statement, we purposed to use the word develop to educate and develop Christian young people, because the idea of development means we always have room to grow. Development, there's not an end to developing something. We're always taking what we have and trying to elevate it to the next level. And so, in that sense, when I think of what are things that we can purpose to have, I mean, if you have any kind of leadership opportunities, when I think of student council and and they plan an event where you have to kind of be careful, and this is I think this is a big juggling act where whoever the supervisor is of that group, they cannot step in and fix all the problems. They got to let them kind of see, yeah, that wasn't good. But at the same time, you got to kind of protect, because you don't want them to be too big of mistakes, because then that does fall back
You
on us
burn
eventually.
down the auditorium.
Right. So I think there can be, without like maybe the intention of being that they're failing, it's simply conscientiously acknowledging this could be good if it actually goes wrong. And we've got to be okay with that. The one I think we just started a new thing this year where we have student council run a chapel. As much, and that is a really important thing in our schools. It's a really important thing to me. You don't want to see that get messed up. Now, granted, they have to submit, what they're going to do, and it has to be approved. So that's where your safety net is a little bit. But you know what? I'm going to let them get up, and I'm going to let them, see like, ooh, that wasn't that good. we didn't consider how long that would actually take, even though when I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, that's going to take longer than they think. So I need to allow them some level, and maybe some are not comfortable with something like a chapel, and I understand that. And maybe it is an event. Maybe it's something that the secondary does for the elementary. As far as like the elementary opportunities to fail, we present to really all of our students an administrator's challenge every year, where they can do a little bit of extra work on their own to memorize a chapter of scripture and quote a couple other things. And we can encourage them to do that. And they might go up and not be able to do it successfully, but maybe they will do it successfully. So there are other opportunities that you can come up with, even within an elementary program, that gives them that opportunity.
We got to cut this off, and I don't want to, because there's more to be said about, is failure success in our Christian schools? And we know that we will fail. We begin life in failure from Father Adam and Mother Eve. So we better be looking forward at failure to our students and how we're going to deal with it. All right, it's time for us to shout out a Christian school administrator. We're going to go to Mount Pisgah, Georgia. We're going to pray for Mary Woods. She's the upper school principal there at Mount Pisgah. And Matt, pray for her and her failure there at Mount Pisgah.
What a segue. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for Marie and the work that she's doing out at Mount Pisgah. And I'm sure there are many things in the upper school that they are working on, maybe programs or other things to introduce within the year, or maybe for next year, that would just help them to achieve their mission that they have. And maybe even for her personally, Lord, that as she navigates that task, perhaps she looked back this year of maybe not handling a situation the way that she would have wanted to, or being able to anticipate an issue. And may she be learning from those things to make her a stronger leader. And may others learn from her example of how she handles failure. And Lord, of course, we pray that you would watch over her relationship with you, guard her time, that she can find that time to kind of set everything else aside and keep you first in her life. I pray that you just continue to give her the support and encouragement that she needs as well. And just bless the rest of her year. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, folks, this is a long one. Thanks for growing with us today.
We want to thank you for listening. We're honored that you spend this time with us each week. Our heart is to bring you practical conversations and resources that really serve you as a Christian school leader. One of the best ways you can help us spread the word is by leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with other Christian school principals you're connected with. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Join the conversation and share any posts that resonate with you. Every share makes a difference in helping more leaders find encouragement and practical tools. And remember, the podcast is just one way we help. We also love serving schools through speaking and workshops. Our keynotes and sessions are designed to give you actionable strategies you can take back to your team and implement right away. If you'd like more details, just send us an email at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com. We'd love to connect. Until next time, thanks for joining us on the Christian Principles Podcast.